Hey guys, it's me, Councilwoman Tameika Devine, and welcome to another edition of Community Conversations with Councilwoman Tameika Devine. I am so excited. Y'all know I've told you guys about this, how excited I am about tonight's episode, just because I have gotten to know Governor Deval Patrick and his wife Diane over the last few months, and I really, really admire both of them, their community service, their education, their compassion and passion for this community, this country. And so when we were talking about different issues to talk about, I figured no better person than to introduce you guys and talk to tonight than Governor Deval Patrick, the former governor of Massachusetts. So welcome, Governor. Thank you for being here.
As always, what a warm welcome. Thank you, Councilman.
I know, because I love it. I love it from the heart. So, I mean, I kind of am speaking from the heart, but I've got to, for those of you who are watching, I have to kind of read his bio because I think most people forget what an amazing man he is and what knowledge he has that will add to this conversation. So I want to make sure that I read his bio to kind of get you guys into this. So anyway, excuse where my eyes are going because I'm trying to multitask and make sure that we are on live everywhere. But for those of you who are not familiar with Governor Patrick, please allow me an opportunity to introduce him to you. Governor Deval Patrick is a civil rights lawyer, author, and businessman who served as the 71st governor of the state of Massachusetts, the first African-American governor in that state and the only the country's second Black elected governor, right after Doug Walter, who was the governor of Virginia. And I have to put a note in. Y'all know that Massachusetts is not majority minority. So he was elected by governor and was reelected governor in a majority Caucasian state. Prior to serving as governor, Deval served as the U.S. Attorney for the Civil Rights Division during the Clinton administration. He has also served as senior advisor to the Chicago Police Accountability Task Force. Governor Patrick has founded it. He's done a lot, and we're going to talk about all that he's done. But most recently, he has founded the TogetherFund. The Together Fund will drive system change by developing and promoting a national narrative on generational responsibility, servant leadership, and the value of progress through collaboration. Throughout his service in public office and in the private sector, Governor Patrick has been a leader in developing solutions to the challenges we all face together as communities and as a country. Better education, climate change, healthcare, the future of work and innovation, and fundamentally social and economic equity, which we will dive into really quickly. The Together Fund is an extension of his vision of effective progressive leadership, and we're really excited to have him here. So, guys, please help me welcome Governor Deval Patrick. So again, Governor, thank you and welcome, and thank you so much for being here. I know you're super busy. I've seen you recently on CNN, MSNBC, everywhere.
Yeah. Well, everybody's talking at long last about these issues of systemic racism, how they manifest themselves in policing, and how that system has to be modernized. But there's a through line right through education and housing and employment and all of the features that are supposed to be the path for the American dream. And it's well nigh time for us to get into root causes for why it is so many Americans feel so stuck.
Yeah, definitely. And like I said in my intro, you have such a breadth of experience from your civil rights law background to your governing background as a governor of a state, to of course, what you do in the private sector. Probably, I would imagine, and I probably would win a lot of money if I bet that probably a lot of times you were the only minority in some of those rooms that you've been in. And you've served, as I mentioned before, as senior advisor to the Chicago Police Accountability. So kind of everything that's going on right now, you really have some experience and some depth. And honestly, some real knowledge because you have shared with me personally, a couple of your thoughts. And so I just really want to delve into this because we've got so many things to cover tonight.
Okay.
So, of course, let's start right now with the unrest that we're seeing in our country. A lot of people consider this a very pivotal time as it relates to civil rights and really trying to have some systemic change in our community, in our country, particularly with police brutality and racial profiling, racial inequities in law enforcement. And so with this, like I mentioned, you've served Chicago Police Accountability Task Force. Can you share with us some of your thoughts about kind of what we're seeing? And I know there's been lots of suggestions and policy recommendations placed out there, but from your experience, what are some of the things that give us an opinion of what you're seeing, but also some of the things that you think are concrete things that we need to be looking at as far as systemic change in our policing, particularly policing of African Americans?
Well, so, the task force you referred to, Tameika, followed the release of the Laquan McDonald video that showed him being shot multiple times, most of that time in the back. A video that was only released after extensive litigation and advocacy from the community and from the family, and it was so shocking. But I'll tell you, for me, it was shocking that it was videotaped, not that it happened. And I say that not as someone who believes that the police are always excessively forceful, but that I have been involved, whether it was in private practice or as head of the Civil Rights Division, in any number of cases where there was little or no accountability. I remember one case I tried did not result in death, thank God, but the humiliation of a young Black medical student in Boston, and he wanted to sue, and he wanted those police officers to be held accountable. And there were two who prepared, they said, independent of each other, statements in their own handwriting about what had happened. And when I asked them under oath on the stand, why is it or how was it that those statements turned out to be word for word the same when they had testified they hadn't consulted with each other? They said it was just a coincidence, and the jury said, okay, and let them go. We've been doing this a long time. Police getting a kind of a wink and nod from a society that had accepted, I think in many ways, that the brutalization, the undervaluing of Black life and Black dignity, the dignity of Black people, was just the price we paid for safety. And the presumption of guilt, of dangerousness that accompanies Black people is something we have talked about, we have advocated about, but I think more and more people are really seeing, because of these videotapes, real evidence of it. And, to watch that police officer in Minneapolis just as casually and matter-of-factly kill George Floyd was shocking. Not necessarily surprising, but shocking. There are many, many law enforcement leaders and law enforcement rank and file officers that I have met and worked with who bring respect and restraint to the job every day. But the culture is of power and dominance and sort of the alpha behavior. And so, long way round to your question, that's the first thing that has to change. The notion of de-escalation, of resolving issues short of an arrest, of talking back, not being, escalated into a crime, because in fact, you have a First and Fourth Amendment right to talk back, to ask, why are you doing this? Why are you arresting me? What is this about? And not to have the expectation that we do as Black people, certainly as Black men, that if we ask those constitutionally permitted questions, it's going to turn in to a dangerous and sometimes deadly situation. I think it is true that the police, frankly, a lot like teachers, have been over the years asked to do more and more things we used to have whole communities or other systems do. The questions of mental health services, of chronic poverty and despair, of opioid addiction, and these issues that relate to uncertainty in families and in communities and in employment. Those lead to all kinds of behavior that are short of criminal or right up against the line, but they need to be faced before they are short of criminal and right up against the line. So the notion of rethinking social services, community services, employment opportunities as ways to get at the root causes of things we now leave to police, and as I say, in many cases also to teachers in school, are issues that we're now talking about that seem more to be taken seriously than they have been for some while, and I think that's a really good thing.
It's funny when you talk about the power. So, my life before councilwoman is I was a prosecutor, and I did domestic violence and sexual assault cases.
Yeah.
And I will tell you, the majority of my defendants were law enforcement officers, because of, there's a high incidence in domestic violence. And I think so, for me, there's so many very good cops. I mean, I work with them every day, men and women who, that they wake up every day wanting to make the community better.
Right.
But what gets elevated are these ones that are drawn to the profession because of the power, the control. And so having that badge and having that gun and having that uniform elevates those things that are already in them.
Right.
And then we see, what we've seen here. And it's just interesting. So I love the way you said reimagining. And you and I talked about this offline. That's kind of as a city leader, that's been some of the frustrating part, hearing folks the drumbeat of the quote defund the police, because conceptually yeah, even my 14-year-old, but conceptually I agree that we have so many things we've asked officers to do that we need to get other folks there. Like, for instance, the city of Columbia, and I shared this with a constituent today that she wasn't even aware. We have, we call it a homeless court. But what we do is when you have the homeless who have the typical crimes that are homeless related crimes, loitering, public urination, all that stuff. Yeah. Instead of arresting them, having a confrontation, we have someone who talks with them and then says, hey, we're going to charge you, but we're going to defer your charge to this homeless court. And at the homeless court, we've got mental health, we've got substance abuse, we've got housing. And so the goal is to get them into housing so you're not criminalizing being homeless. And so there are lots of things. I know San Francisco is thinking of some really creative things, but I think it's interesting because people are, when they talk about defund the police, we can't have a society without police, but what we can is reimagine, using your word, rethinking the way that we police, particularly we police in African-American communities, so that we are adding back investment and support systems into the community that reduce the interactions with police.
I very much agree with where you are. I mean, it is true that there are some people who talk about defunding the police who really mean eliminating policing, but more often than not, what I hear is a catchy slogan, a sort of a jarring slogan that means pay attention to diversion. Not everything needs to be a crime. Maybe you do a citation if the police are called, and divert. We have drug courts in Massachusetts, for example. To me, it has always been a little nutty that we deal with a health problem in the criminal justice system instead of through health channels. But that is a broken part of our system. We have it within our power to fix that. Similarly, as you say, with homelessness, there are lots of folks who are homeless who, in fact, rarely do I meet or deal with anyone who's homeless who wants to be. There are circumstances, the way life complicates and intervenes in your plans and upends your plans, and you end up on the street, and all of the despair and the desperate actions that sometimes provokes. So let's deal with the homelessness. Let's invest in that. I think so. This notion of doing citations and diversions, as you said, rather than arrests and hurling people into a criminal justice system which is already overburdened, and places an emphasis on minimum mandatory sentencing. All of that has to be rethought, and we've got to be brave enough as policymakers to do so. And that is one of the reasons why I love the fact that there's so many peaceful marchers of every kind of background out on the streets day after day, because that kind of activism often gives people in public office the courage they need to act.
Before I get my next question, I put the comment up here because I have to say, Gail Wilson says, Governor Patrick, City Year SC loves you, and we adore the Divine family. Thank you, Gail. But yeah, City Year, you've done a lot with that, and they are really a beacon here. So yeah, so shout out to you from City Year.
Shout out to City Year and all those who serve. I'm a great believer in community service.
So one of the things I heard you say on the campaign several times, and I just love, you would present your vision for this country when you were candidate for president, and talk about how for so long we have been presented with false choices, and you would give a litany of them, but particularly one that you talked about was we have to there's people believe that you got to hate police to believe Black Lives Matter, and you saying that just seems like it's so fortuitous now, because sometimes I really feel like that is the place that we are in. I shared with you when we talked offline that Columbia was one of the cities that had some destruction during our first night of protest. They've since have been very peaceful, and we've got lots of conversations going on, but there's still a segment of folks who believe that you have to choose one or the other, and that is a false choice. So I guess from your experience and all the hats that you've worn, how do you feel? I mean, why do you feel, or how do you feel we got here in this country to the point where we are so polarized and feel like you got to choose a side instead of trying to figure out how do you come together for real solutions to make everybody's lives better?
Well, it's a hard question, because I don't think we got here overnight. I don't think it was just the election of Donald Trump, although I think division, it was his political strategy and it's been his governing strategy. I mean, the whole idea that you could politicize a pandemic is something I never would have imagined. A national emergency, and somehow or other that got politicized too. But it is a time-honored political device, right? To use division and hate and fear as a way to gain and hold on to office. We haven't had leadership, certainly in my view, at the federal level in recent years, or in many cases at all levels of government, that is more about doing the job than having it. And by that I mean, sort of gets to this point, has a lot to do with why we started together the TogetherFund. Every one of us was taught by our grandparents that we're supposed to do what we can in our time to leave things better for those who come behind us. Every one of us, every community, that generational responsibility that we are. We're supposed to do it may be in high office, it may be at home, but you're supposed to do something that leaves things better. And it seems to me that the duty to do that is even greater when the public has entrusted you with leadership. We haven't had leadership for some while that hasn't either been in the business of division, as I said, or in the business of trying to call out the division instead of offering a positive alternative. I'm a Democrat. I don't think you have to hate Republicans to be a good Democrat. I don't think you have to hate business to be a social justice warrior. I've been both. And as I say, I don't think you have to hate police to believe Black Lives Matter. But you can't be afraid of calling out what's wrong with the one in order to be a successful and effective advocate for the other. So, we have, I guess what I would say is we've gotten into this. I saw this in business as well, this very, quarter to quarter management, very focused on the short term, sometimes sacrificing the long-term interests of the enterprise. I think that same bad habit has crept into the way we govern in America, where we govern for the next election cycle or news cycle, not for the next generation. You understand what I'm saying? And I think that bad habit has led us to some real short-term policies that have long-term devastation, but they sound good in the moment. 3 strikes and you're out sounded pretty, tight, compact, tough, all that. Tough on crime. There's another one, right? What the heck does that mean?
The law and order president.
The law and order president. What does any of it actually mean, especially law and order coming from the most lawless and chaotic president we've had in a long, long time? We need to be more about what policy means where it actually touches people. And to me, if we have come to expect the worst of Republicans at the national level, I think we've come to expect the minimum from Democrats. We don't organize our agenda anymore around values of leadership and values that are American values, meaning we loosely do, but we don't keep coming back to the why. Why do we want schools that function and don't fail so often poor children? Why do we want everyone to have access to affordable, high quality health care? Everyone. Why do we want an economy that grows out to everybody, so it's creating opportunities for the marginalized and not just up to the well-connected? Why? Because we believe that this whole idea of being able to imagine a different future for yourself and then to work for it, that notion of the American dream, is essential to who we are, which is why I keep saying, and you've heard me say, if the character of the candidate is a question in every election, this time it's the character of the country. And I think we have to keep coming back to that and push our party, not just to perfect its critique of what's wrong with the other side, but to say more about what's right with us and why. I think that's how you build a campaign. It's how you build a movement. It's how you build a better country.
Great. That's why I'm so excited about the Together Fund. So we're going to get to that in a second, but I really want to ask you about, because you were in the Clinton administration, you were the U.S. Attorney over the Civil Rights Division. And I don't know if people really understand a couple things. I don't think people understand the importance of, who you elect on that position, because they put people in place that can do things that will affect some of the things that we're dealing with now. Mm-hmm. And there's been a lot of talk about, the Civil Rights Division under this current administration and whether or not they are getting involved where they should and some of the things. So for those folks who don't really understand kind of the hierarchy of the legal system, particularly the Department of Justice and the U.S. Attorney's Office, can you explain a little bit about the Civil Rights Division and particularly
sorry. That's a grandson trying to FaceTime and
FaceTime his grandmama. And mine does that all the time.
I'm sorry.
No.
Oh dear. I don't know how to turn that off preemptively, but so the Assistant Attorney General for Civil Rights is the highest civil rights law enforcement position in the federal government. And you run the Civil Rights Division of the United States Department of Justice in Washington. At the time I was there were a couple of hundred attorneys, and we worked collaboratively with the U.S. Attorney's offices around the country, including the 2, I think there are in South Carolina. And the agenda runs from hate crimes and police misconduct to employment discrimination to religious discrimination, issues around. We were even dealing with issues following on the internment of Japanese Americans during the Second World War and the reparations program that had been put in place to address their needs, issues around disability rights and so forth. And it is like any law enforcement job, Tameika, it's full of discretion. What you decide to emphasize, what you decide to de-emphasize, because resources are limited and the need is great. We tried, it was a fulfilling job for me because I was there at a time when the division was actually in the civil rights business and the administration was interested in it. And I had a terrific attorney general who gave me a lot of room and a president who was personally engaged and with whom I had a regular direct communication. So we tried to be vigorous about enforcing the law. And we got, I think, most of it right. We hit a number of records in terms of the number of cases, the number of victories, the number of people served. We were very, very active division. We enforced voting rights, for example, before the Supreme Court gutted the Voting Rights Act. So that meant a lot of pre-clearance of changes in polling places, changes in voting systems, transparency, and access to registrations and things that, frankly, you wish the division could get involved in now and would get involved in now. Police misconduct was one of them. Systematic reforms of police departments, frequently through, starting with a lawsuit but ending in a negotiation and consent decree. And it can be a very effective part of the federal government in securing people's basic freedoms. I was honored to serve some wonderful people I served alongside.
We're grateful that you were there at that time. I know when I first got elected, we had pre-clearance, and I share with you again offline. And for those of you who are watching who are here in Richland County, our debacle last week with elections. And, those are some of the things that happen now with our elections did not happen back when we did have the Voting Rights Act, and we had some safeguards and some checks and balances on the way elections were handled.
I saw a map today of the polling places in Milwaukee in 2016. And I want to say there might have been, 40 or 50 of them, maybe more. There were 5 in 2020, just as an example. Those kinds of decisions, if they were in the states subject to pre-clearance, like South Carolina, they would have had to get permission from the Justice Department before making those kinds of decisions, because the department was empowered to consider the impact on Black and brown voters. That is a provision of the Voting Rights Act that the Supreme Court gutted in a decision that I think was frankly shocking on the loose theory that times had changed, and just as soon as they gutted that part of the Voting Rights Act, folks went right back to the same old or types of the same old tricks and games to try to make access to the ballot harder, and that should worry all of us, everybody. As I said, I think of myself as a Democrat who doesn't have to hate Republicans to be a good Democrat, but on access to the ballot, there has been a systemic and concerted effort over many years, led by the National Republican Party, to make it harder to register, harder to vote, harder to stay on the voter rolls, through a series of ideas and manipulations that have been spread out broadly to allies all across the country, leaving me to wonder whether Republicans think they could win a fair fight. And all any of us are asking for is a fair fight. That is a constitutional right. It's an American expectation, but it is not the reality today. And if the Civil Rights Division was doing its job, And if the current administration was showing any real leadership, they would get at that and get at that hard, because that, frankly, ought to transcend party interests.
Yeah. That's why I always tell people I hesitate to say that this is the most important election, because every single election to me is important. But the stakes are so high in November, and it is so important that we get out. Which really leads me to the fun part of the conversation.
Well, just before we go on, just on this point, I just want to encourage you and all of your viewers, have a plan for voting. If you think you're not going to be able to get to the poll on election day, then figure out how to get your absentee ballot, or if you're in a place where you can do early voting, make a plan to do that so that you do it well enough before the deadlines, that your vote is actually counted. If you have to be at a polling place on election day, know where it is. Make sure well enough in advance that your registration is up to date, that you have whatever documentation you may need to make sure that you can vote. And if you think you're going to have to be there longer than is reasonable, there's a lot of work going on to make sure that polling places are increased in number rather than reduced in number, as we're seeing, as a way to suppress the vote. But if we can't get the rules changed, make provision. Bring a sandwich, bring a folding chair if that's what it takes. We need to overwhelm the other side with the size of the mandate that we give to Joe Biden, that we give to Jamie Harrison, that we give to really good candidates who are bringing that sense of servant leadership to the job, and then we need to hold them accountable once elected.
Definitely so important. So that talks about the Together Fund. Now, I know when you were here in December and January, you talked a little bit about kind of some of the things that you wanted to do. I know at that point you were focused on your campaign. Some people, campaigns are over and they, kind of took a relaxing moment. You didn't. When you suspended your campaign, you got to work on saying, well, how else can I amplify my voice and other voices and help? And so can you just share with everybody, what is the Together Fund, and what are the vision and goals for that? How do you see that helping some of these issues that we've talked about?
Thank you for asking. So Together Fund is a political action committee. We set it up to help, really to be my platform for helping the Biden campaign for president. I've known him for 25 or more years, and he's a good man, and he has the empathy that we need, I think, in our leader today. I am also going to be active in a small number of Senate and House races where the candidates are competing in places where Democrats have not competed for a long time or haven't been successful in the past, because I think that organizing a campaign and prosecuting it around these leadership values I've been talking about, of generational responsibility, of servant leadership, of our building a community where, like in my old neighborhood on the south side of Chicago, you were under the jurisdiction of every adult on the block, right? We understood we had a stake in each other, that those are timeless values. They transcend party, and they can be useful and important in organizing a campaign and making a case that draws everybody in. We announced our first endorsements last week for the Senate. Your own Jamie Harrison, who is just a gifted, yes, indeed, a gifted, not just a gifted candidate, he's a gifted citizen, and he understands that citizenship means sacrifice. It means this notion of being responsible for not just this moment, but for generations to come, about not just accumulating political capital, but spending it, because that's what it takes to get stuff done. And that it means remembering that is your first job, being a senator, not being a citizen. Being a senator is the representative job you have, but your first job and your first focus is the people you serve. and how you hear and see them, including the ones who are not often seen and heard. I think Jamie is a very, very special candidate, and we're fortunate to be able to support him and to support a handful of others who will help us flip the Senate and hold the House.
Great. So are you thinking that if we get these types of candidates, we can affect the systemic change that we really need in this country?
I think it's a start. It's an indispensable start, but I think we make a mistake sometimes in our politics by thinking that once we have cast the vote for the right person, there's nothing left to do. You know, we've got to stay connected to our office holders. We have to insist that they stay connected to us. You know, the issues evolve, they change. They're not all local issues, but they should connect back to local issues, and they should connect back to foundational values. And for folks to get, you know, when I left the Civil Rights Division at the end of the first term of the Clinton administration, you know, the president had been reelected. It was time to go home. My family, for most of that time, had stayed in Boston, and I was commuting back and forth on the weekends by driving overnight on Friday. So I was home for the soccer games on Saturday morning, and then driving overnight on Sunday after I put the kids to bed, so I could be in the office to start the week Monday morning. And I was broke, and said so. It was just time to be home. But I also felt when I left, and I said, and I felt this way when I left the governor's office after 2 terms. We don't have term limits. I have one named Diane. But I think you need to leave jobs like that while you still remember how to take out the garbage and open your own door. Do you understand what I'm saying? You know,
Yeah.
there is a way we have that our general celebrity culture in this country has also become a part of public service. And I understand it. And, you know, maybe that's a good thing, but if you don't learn how to walk with kings and keep the common touch, you're not what we need in public office today. And so I think it's important, either by coming and going from government, or by just assuring that you have routines in your politics that keep you deeply connected, that you step back from the you know, the gilded halls from every once in a while, and just remember policy matters where it touches people.
That's good. That is so good. So how can people support the work of the Together Fund? And I'll make sure I push it out there, the website, but how can people support the work that you're doing, and what are some of the action steps that you'd like to see people taking?
Yeah, so we are as I say, we're endorsing a handful of candidates, and we'll be rolling out endorsements over the next few weeks. And by the way, they are in every case not just you know, announcements in a press release. We're going to be working alongside candidates as and campaigns as surrogates. We look forward to supporting monetarily and through coaching and time some of the grassroots groups that are supporting those candidates and their campaigns, because it's really important to bring out new voters or lapsed voters, young voters, old, everybody in the middle. It's important to engage with people who don't already agree with us, right? We've got to model a politics that says you don't have to agree on everything before we work together on anything. And so we're looking for opportunities, and we are soliciting ideas from communities where the candidates we have endorsed are campaigning for how we can help what they are trying to do alongside the formality of the campaign. You can do that by communicating with us and following us on social media, or through the website, which is TogetherFundPAC.com.
I'm putting that in here just so people will have it, and I'll make sure that it keeps being out there.
And we welcome contributions as well, but certainly, you know, feedback and engagement is number one.
Perfect. Perfect. Now, I got this question on my other Facebook page. I got to ask this question. So, people want to know, everyone knows that you are very good friends with President Obama. So, someone wanted to know, have you talked to him recently, and does he know how much we miss him?
He knows how much I miss him. I have talked to him, probably not for a month or so. He can speak for himself. I don't need to speak for him, but it won't surprise you that the times we're in make him as heartsick as they do me and you and many of your viewers. I think, there was, how should I put this? When you think about the pandemic and the disruption it has brought to everyone's life, the fact is that there was economic unease, healthcare disparity, addiction, social isolation, all of that before the pandemic. Right? Those rosy economic indicators that the president was so fond of citing, unemployment was low as long as you counted both or all three of the low wage jobs that many people had just to survive. You ask anybody who pays a tuition bill or a rent or mortgage payment or a healthcare premium about inflation, it doesn't feel low to them. We had folks in suburbs who were using food banks and their credit cards to make ends meet way before the pandemic. And it reminds me of something that President Obama said as a candidate after Katrina, when he talked about how all those people who were stranded on those rooftops were abandoned before that storm. These disasters expose the unfinished work of America. And I think if there is a blessing in there somewhere about this moment, it is that it should remind us that if we are true to our best and highest ideals as a nation, then we got to finish that unfinished work and do so with urgency.
I've said it several times on here, but I was watching CNN one time, and Don Lemon he talked about the coronavirus. He said it is the great equalizer in that, it didn't discriminate based on race, age, what your socioeconomic status. But he said it was also the great magnifier. It magnified all the inequities that we had already in this country. And, it's so hard. And so I also think that, the unrest we're seeing right now, as far as police, is deeper than the police. It's just magnifying that, because it's just been so much building up that all these things that we're dealing with, and people are just fed up.
Yeah. No, it's a Derek Bell, who was a professor at Harvard Law School when I was there, African-American professor, would make this argument that the gains we've made in this country in civil rights were not entirely because we had a more forward-leaning Supreme Court, not entirely because we won the moral point in the Congress of the United States, but in part because there was a confluence of interests between the minority population and the majority population. And right now, the economic uncertainty, the social isolation I talked about, the way those issues become issues at election time and then vanish in between, those are experiences that Black people have had in America for generations, but that people are feeling in every corner of America today, right? The economy is changing. The nature of work is changing and has been changing rapidly. The way in which the mechanisms that enable you to lift yourself and your family and move forward, great, accessible, affordable education, affordable health care so that you didn't have that anxiety on top of all the other things you were worried about, an economy that was expanding out, not just up. So there was a place in it when you were ready for it. These sorts of things that made a way for, I'm not discounting the importance of grit and determination, of faith and blessings. I'm not discounting that at all. Personal responsibility is a part of it. I grew up on welfare. I had all of those qualities and then some, adults in the neighborhood who cared about me. But I also had food stamps when our family was hungry, and a public hospital when we needed to see a doctor, right? We had underfunded schools, but we had well-prepared teachers in them who cared about us and had enough time in the day so that they could pay attention to us, even at 35 in a classroom. Do you understand what I'm saying? So there are some things, some systems that are enabling of people, and government has some responsibility for those systems and things, in not solving everybody's problem, but helping people help themselves. And that is a realization that I'm hoping we are coming back to. And I'm hoping as Democrats compete and complete successfully from the presidency right on down for this and the next few cycles, that we remember why we're there, not just that we're there, and that we really lean forward and try to go deep into fixing some of these systems for a generation or two.
Definitely. I know there's probably people thinking like I am. I've always loved hearing you talk and your vision and your pragmatic approach, but also optimistic approach. So I know, no one has a crystal ball, but do we think we'll see you somewhere in a Biden administration?
You know what? That is not my first priority. And everyone who asks me about something like that, I say, don't jinx it. First thing we need to do is get a Biden administration. And then we got to push a Biden administration in the same way that I and others are trying to push the campaign. I think the speech he gave, was it last week or the week after, or the week before? His last, most recent speech in response to the unrest in the streets, as you said, was a really important statement and indication that he understands that he's got to refresh his own outlook about what our policy needs to be and our urgency around it. There's a lot more to this campaign than sort of, better than Trump. And there has to be. We got to make some deep and important changes to the point, as I said, where policy actually touches people and gives them a reason to hope. So that's the first thing. And I can serve outside of an administration as much as in there, lots of different ways.
You already are.
I'm going to try to do so. That's for sure. Thank you.
You already are. You're doing so many amazing things. And I think that's key, what you're saying about pushing the campaign and pushing the administration. People do. I tell people that all the time. Electing people is just the first step.
That's right.
But making sure that they are held accountable is even more. And that's really how this even got birthed, because when we were in quarantine, my responsibilities to the citizens I served didn't end. I just couldn't go out and do some of the things I did. So right. I was like, what else can I do? And I'm like, well, we can have those important conversations while everybody's captive at home. Yeah. Now, our state has opened up and hit another spike. So we're not captive at home anymore, but we're still having these needed conversations. So with that said, I want to thank you so much for joining me. I just always adore talking with you and Diane. I could talk to you guys for hours, because y'all are just, again, your passion for this country and your insights on the things that we need to address and change as a country are just so important and need to be part of the conversation. So yeah, whether it's in an administration or out of administration, I know your voice will continue to be out there. And so I want people to continue to listen. With that said, how can people watch you? I know I follow you on Twitter, but share with everybody, because I want everybody to continue to watch what you're doing. I've got TogetherFundPack.com up here, so please go there and find out more information. But how can people?
I'll send you around the Twitter handle and the, Instagram and all that stuff. I'm not trying to be a celebrity or a sensational. I just want to. All I'm trying to do is remind people that that there isn't a single issue we face in this country that is beyond our capacity to care about or to solve. Because frankly, most of them we made, right? Or we let be made. They were made by man. They can be fixed by man. And if we stay focused on why it's so important, not to, turn our representation and our government over to moneyed interests, that we all have a stake in each other's dreams and struggles as well as our own, then we'll start to think about what ways, great and small, we can contribute to making of America the kind of country she needs to be for all of us to prosper and to have justice. And I really believe that.
That's excellent. That's great to end on. So thank you again, Governor, for your service. Thank you for your friendship. My mom and Jamie say hi.
Good. Say hi back.
And thank you so much for continuing to, just have faith in this country and our democracy, because, we can't lose faith. We can't lose hope. Doesn't mean that we don't have criticisms. We don't mean there aren't things that that we don't need to fix. But, we got to continue to have faith that if we have an effort together, we can make the changes that need to happen.
That's the idea. That's the idea. Stay safe and be well. Keep the faith.
Definitely. And for those of you watching, thank you again so much. Continue to share this so that more people can hear about the TogetherFund Pact, as well as some of the insights that Governor Patrick has provided us with. And stay tuned for our next community conversation. I am working to get Charles Austin here from the Richland County Election Commission. So hopefully we'll get that this week, and we can ask him some tough questions too, hold him accountable as to what they're going to do. Like the governor said, what is our plan for making sure that we have a good election in November? So until next time, I am Councilwoman Tameika Isaac Devine. Thank you so much for joining me. God bless. Have a good night, and we'll see you next time. Thanks.